1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the first episode of the Immigrants and Exiles podcast, a conversation recorded at the Beachcomber Cafe in St Kilda between me, Moreno, and my friend Walter, about our families and lives in general as the children of immigrant parents. In today's episode, we talk about our families before they came to Australia and the early years in what Walter calls the penal colony, and I, in the book I have written and which will be published in 2025, refer to as the English colony. Walter and I have been coming here to the Beachcomber for how long, Walter?
At least a year and a half.
A year and a half. We come here every second Friday for lunch and to talk. Sometimes we talk for 5 hours.
We talk more than we eat.
I remember the first time, I think your wife rang to find out what had happened to you. Okay, Walter and I met at uni in the 1970s. It was probably 1975. Were you at Melbourne Uni in 1975?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, that was
in
it.
1975.
Okay. And
we did plays together.
We did, and we went later on. We went to the footy. We barracked for Essendon.
Yes, I don't like sport, but I love Moreno.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're doing this, we're having this talk. For me, anyway, I've decided that other people like us, children of migrants from the 50s, 60s, and later, might be interested in hearing us talk about our families.
And we're very interested in remembering our families.
We are.
And telling
absolutely.
the truth about them.
Yep. So today we're going to start off by talking about our families. These are the people that there's a lot of general talk about Italians, Italian migrants, but not much detail. So we're going to go into some detail.
And we're going to avoid the cliches.
We are.
The comical stereotypes.
That's right. No spaghetti. Okay.
No.
Oh, don't laugh. Come on, Jesus. I'm going to edit that out. No spaghetti. Okay, so you want to start?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I do want to make a point.
Oh, brioche. Thanks,
Yum.
Michael.
Michael just delivered.
Michael is the...
Yeah, thank you. He just delivered a croissant with, he cut it in half and there's jam and butter there for me to spread on.
Michael's one of the managers. He's a fantastic guy.
He's a lovely guy, and he's an Essendon supporter too.
Yeah, talking about migrants.
Now, could I just say one thing before you take off? My parents were migrants, okay?
Yeah.
Italian migrants. What I find interesting about your thinking about your family is that your parents were not Italian migrants. They were exiles.
Yes, Italians.
Okay. Big difference here between yours and mine. So go for it, Walter. Go.
So, yeah, they were Italians as I see it. They were not Italo-Australians.
Okay.
And I grew up in an Italian family, not a family of escapees from socio-economic challenges back in Italy.
Yep.
They had pretty high-powered careers in Rome, and they left for personal reasons. And that was a particular struggle for them, the fact that they didn't really belong to the migrant society of Italo-Australians. And they certainly didn't belong to the Australian society of Anglo-Saxons, Anglo-Celts, Scottish, Irish, English people. That meant that there were repercussions for me because I could never integrate. So I was living in isolation because I was an Italian, also exiled like them. And my dad kind of liked that idea. I could only speak Italian and French too, because that was his other language that he'd grown up with.
And Arabic.
Well, Arabic, yeah, but Arabic was a lot more difficult, and because they were Europeans in the Middle East.
But so, why did your dad have these three languages?
Well, he went to French schools all through his...
Where was he born?
In Alexandria, in Egypt.
It was... Oh, okay. Now, how come?
Because his parents were born there. So his grandparents must have moved there like a lot of Europeans during the heyday of colonialism.
Yep.
And they had a very happy childhood in Alexandria. I think my grandfather was... he owned a chain of hair salons for men and women. 14 kids, and my dad, although he'd had a very tragic, severe accident as a child and couldn't walk, he still loved being taken to the beach by his brothers, and he always remembers the idealised life, the idyllic life that they led there. Italy was great when he went there as a student and got his degree in Naples, and then he started his career in the Bank of Rome, where in Rome he met my mum, who was a fashion designer and a model as well. And then they had to come to Australia to be together. That was the choice they made. And Australia was a less than happy experience overall.
Listen, just going back to your mum.
Yep.
She wasn't from Rome, was she?
No, she was from near Pordenone in northern Italy, in the Friuli region.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why did they move to Rome, her family?
I think probably in her case, her father, who was a war hero, he was an Alpino, and he was knighted for his services in World War I, but he was also a carpenter. And her mother was a casalinga, so he moved to Rome to work for somebody in carpentry. And now, Moreno, I want to ask you a question about your parents.
Okay. What do you want to ask me?
Well, what was their background? Why did they come to Australia?
Okay. My dad, my father Ugo, was from a family that had migrants go to America in the late 1800s and in the early 1900s. Both his grandfather, Tista, and his father, Vitale, went to America. They did reasonably well. They brought back some money, which Vitale in particular promptly lost during the Great Depression.
My wife's father's father went to America and did the same thing.
Lost money in the Depression.
Yeah, but he made money too.
He made money. Yeah, well,
but lost it too.
Yeah, they brought back money. They bought extra fields. That's what they would do. They would come back because they were peasants. All they knew was buy more fields, buy extra cows, you know, that kind of thing.
They actually succeeded where Columbus failed. They actually found America.
They did.
Not the West Indies.
They did. So my dad's got this in his family, and he grows up. He's a peasant farmer. He's in his 20s. He's not happy because his older brother got married and takes one of the cows and a couple of fields. There's also a younger brother who's 12 years old, and there's still his parents and grandparents to support on these few little fields and a couple of cows and so on. He's just feeling restricted. And there was one thing that happened in his life in particular. When he was probably in his early 20s, he and a friend, Roberto Massei, went to Rome for a cooperative conference. Cooperatives were big in Italy.
Cooperative.
At the time, yeah. And on the way back, they stopped at a place called Castel Fiorentino. Beautiful name. I love those Italian names. Castel Fiorentino, where Roberto had done some of his training. He was an agricultural scientist. He later became a school teacher, taught agricultural science. But they visited this large estate where there were vineyards. Wheat was grown. They had dozens of peasant farmers working this estate, the owners did. They even grew tobacco. And they had cattle. And my dad told me the story once about his visit there. He was pretty impressed with this place, the Castel Fiorentino estate. And I think it had an effect on him. He started thinking about, you know, if I go to America, I could probably own a place like this. So that stayed in his mind, and eventually, he got married. My mum, he was 9 years older than my mum, and they had me. I was born within a year of the getting married. Now, my mum lived 100 metres from my father in the village, and they had an interesting kind of relationship. My mum didn't like her in-laws, didn't get on with them, and
intimacy breeds contempt.
And as my dad had applied to emigrate to Canada or Australia, the Australians got back to him straight away, so he picked Australia. And he's getting ready to leave. He's leaving in a month. My mum has this massive row with her mother-in-law, Irma, and she picks me up and walks 100 metres to her parents. My dad hangs around for another month before the ship leaves. On the 1st of January, 1957, he gets the train to Genova, hops on the ship, and he's off to Australia. My mum, he didn't want my mum to come. My mum waited a year, and then she went to Rome by herself. She left me with her parents for a night or two. She stayed in a young women's youth hostel in Rome, and got her immigration papers ready to come to Australia.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
To interrupt? Already you're making me think about one of the realities that we ignore or we're not even aware of about these people who migrate.
Yeah.
They're not destitute. They're not people who live on the streets in a state of despair.
Well, mine certainly weren't.
No.
And neither were yours, obviously.
No.
Yeah.
We think of them as material beings.
Yes.
They had to go and get something better than they were leaving behind.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think of them as spiritual beings.
Yes.
So they're explorers and adventurers. Your mum, it took guts to leave a little village and go to Rome on her own and do all this bureaucratic stuff.
Yep.
Your dad, I knew your dad very well, and he was a naturally gifted philosopher. So if he'd had more educational opportunities in Italy, who knows what he would have been? Maybe a teacher.
Yep.
And you were going to be a teacher at one stage.
I was, yeah.
And I think about my wife's father, who finished grade 5, but then had to go and look after animals and till the soil in his little village. But he was a smart cookie. In fact, he looked after properties for the church.
Yes.
And he was very good with figures, with debits and credits, accounts. He might have been an accountant with different opportunities in Italy. So they had this great living imagination and intellects as well, who sometimes they had to put to one side to just become beasts of burden.
Well, my dad finished primary school, which is basically what Italians did in those days. We're talking about the 40s here, during the war. Then he did a couple of years of secondary school, and then because the war was so disruptive, the Germans were retreating through the district. The American army was after them. There was shooting in the hills, cannon fire. He just stopped. My dad stopped going to school. Lost interest, was distracted, and so he never continued. But Roberto, his friend that he went to Castel Fiorentino with, did finish his studies and became a school teacher.